Hey guys, it's Lindy.
And Mike.
And we wanted to make this video today explaining how we built our tiny house out of metal studs. And we wanted to put a disclaimer in the beginning. We are not master builders. This is the first time we've used metal studs. We have built other structures out of wood, but this is our first time using metal. And the reason that we chose metal is because it is lighter than wood. It's about 30%. Which if you have a lower weight limit on your trailer like we do, anytime you can save weight, that's a really big deal. It can be cheaper than wood or about the same.
Yeah, I also want to mention that the whole house with metal studs will be about 30% lighter, but stud for stud, it's 70% lighter, so you can save a lot of weight if you got a lot of studs going on in there. And so we're going to go over step by step the things that were really hard for me to find when I was researching it, you know, how to cut it the best way and, you know, safe practices. So stay tuned for all that, and we'll show you how we built this wall and build another one. All right, so here's our biggest, most complicated wall that I can use to explain a few of our techniques and the differences. So the first thing you need to know is that there is two types of metal that you're working with. You're working with a U-channel or a track, which is simply just a U like that, and then you're working with your stud, which is technically a C-channel. It curls back in like that, as you can see. And so there's three main types of cuts that we're going to go over. The first one is simply a straight flat cut, which is very easy. As you can see here, this is the track, and then that's the stud meeting, and this is just a straight flat cut on both ends. And then the next one, which is a little bit more difficult, is a sort of butt end cut. As you can see, sort of cut the top off and peeled it up and then screwed it on both sides. And then the hardest type of cut, I would say, is where you have to cut out a hole, which we did here, where they sort of intersect, they cross through each other. The stud goes right up through the track, and that's the hardest one, and we'll show you how to do those.
So one of the distinctions between the tracks and the studs is the track runs on a horizontal axis, and it actually sandwiches the vertical studs in between it. And as you can see on the studs, they have these holes on them, and that is so that you can run your electrical through.
So another important thing that I wish somebody told me right away was that the direction of your studs and tracks really matter right around your doors and windows. You want the flat side to be facing in all the way around your door and your window. That way you can just screw your door in and have a nice solid surface for your windows to attach. And then also, if we were doing wood, you could just be doing, you know, two studs over the top, and it would create a strong surface above it. But for doors and windows, you have to build a little truss, which we essentially do by taking track and sandwiching studs inside. The studs are the diagonal points. It's just like the top and bottom of the wall, and so that makes it really strong once you get that triangulation.
So these are the screws that we used. They are number 8 3/4 inch lath screws. They're actually a little bit longer than we wanted, but we are in the middle of rural Iowa, so we had to take what we could get. And the reason we use these is because they have a much smaller bump out than normal screws, so it can help things lay a little bit more flush. And they are self-drilling. Actually, on the other side of our frame, we ran out of self-drilling ones, and we pre-drilled all the holes and then used a last screw without this self-drilling bit, and it actually kind of felt tighter than these ones. So we're going to show you how to do a straight normal cut on one of the studs. For this one, we just have to cut 6 inches off. Measure 6 inches out. Use a square, and then you also need to make sure to turn the stud so that it's marked on all sides, so it's square on all sides. Whee! Cut myself here during our video. Once you have your line all squared, you take your box cutter and you score down the line, pushing pretty even pressure all the way down. Careful not to cut into yourself. You take your tin snips, try and keep the middle of this tin snip lined up with the middle of the line, and just cut to the edge here. Preferably with gloves, because these are really sharp. You just take the piece and bend it back and forth a few times. You'll feel it kind of start to get looser and eventually just snap off. If you have a shorter piece, like maybe around an inch or so, you can actually take the pliers and bend it back and forth. It makes it a little bit easier. So you notice after you pull your cut off that you'll have these flares on the C-channel, and we like to take these needle nose pliers and just gently bend those back in so that it lays flush. So let's say that you have a cut like this one where it's 60 inches long, but the line ends up in one of the holes. Well, you don't want to just make the cut directly across the hole because that can weaken the beam. So what we do is we basically shift the measurement over. So we would take this end and we would make a line at 6 inches, cut that off, and then your starting point would be about 6 inches over, so that on the end here, the 60 would be past the hole.
All right, so next I'm going to show you how to do a T-joint, sort of where your track will butt up against perpendicular to your stud. Essentially, you're going to cut a slit that's a little more than 1 1/4 for this. This is 3.5 by 1 1/4. So in order to do that really efficiently, what I've decided to do is essentially just mark my tools, mark my cutter. And so I just cut to that point, the 2 points that are about 1.25 inches away. And then once that is done, I take a plier, which I've also marked at that same distance, and I just bend up on each side and then in the middle. And then I've got a really nice joint right there, and then you just screw in on both sides like that. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to do a hole where you have the stud going directly up and through the track. Essentially, I start by marking where it is on center. This one's going to be right here on center, and then I make sort of a little jig out of an existing stud where I just match up my center lines on each side and mark. Do the other side. And then this is what we're going to cut out. All right, you might be wondering, how do you cut out a hole? I'm going to start it by drilling a 1/4 inch hole with a plug-in drill. And so let's get a close-up look on this. And what I'm doing so that the stud has a little bit of room to fine tune, I'm gonna cut on the outside of the line. And there's something that happens here where it actually has too much tension for you to really get too far when you're cutting. It's really hard to cut, and so I tend to really come in and create a second cut that gives you plenty of slack so that you can actually continue the cut. Sometimes you need to break it out even harder, but just got that. You can keep going, follow the line. These curves can be a little bit tricky, but if you just get the very tip there going, then you can kind of twist around it. And ta-da! Now you got a hole that you can stick your stud through. And here is another type of joint. This is just when you need to extend your track, and the way I do that is just put 2 tack points in, 2 screws so that it's rigid. And then since the track is the same width, you can't just fit it into itself. So what I did was just make 2 little snips, one on each corner. That lets it sort of bump in a little bit and fit inside the other one, and then screw it all together, and you got a pretty good strong joint there. And here's the final type of joint I did, which is over a wheel well. I essentially just took some track and reversed it and cut the sort of same angle and then screwed it all together so that it's rigid. And one little trick I figured out, which saved me so much time, was when you go to drill into these studs, if there's no counter pressure here, they tend to bend and they're really hard to screw into. And so what I did is I just made a little jig that sort of puzzle pieces in, and that way you can push down, screw right next to it. Don't accidentally screw on top of it, because I've done that and I just screw the wood to it, and that's annoying. So put it near your drill point. This way it can hold the pressure when you're trying to screw or tap into it, and it won't bend. All right, to summarize the pros and cons, building with steel is way lighter, probably not much more expensive or possibly cheaper. It is more fuel efficient, which we didn't even mention. If you're driving along the road, 30% less weight means a lot less gas. The cons would be it can be kind of a little dangerous. You can cut yourself. It's a little can be a little bit more tedious to work with, a little bit more of a puzzle, and it's just no one knows how to do it seems like.
Another good plus too in terms of energy savings is doesn't require power tools, so it's a lot quieter build. It's all basically hand tools except for a few electric drills and the one plug-in that we use. So that can also be a plus if you're building in more like an urban neighborhood and you don't want to disturb your neighbors.
So in that sense, it is safer. You might gash yourself, like I kind of nipped my toe a little bit the other day on it. Don't wear sandals. But a power tool is probably more dangerous. You're probably not going to cut your whole hand off or a finger off with this stuff. All right, so that's it for today. Let us know if you're a master of this and we did anything wrong. It'd be great to know down below.
Yeah, let us know if you guys found these tips helpful and if you're building a tiny house and what you've decided to build yours out of.
All right, thanks then. See you in the next video.
Bye.
Bye.